So I was waiting for that little message to pop up. Welcome back. Hopefully you had some fruitful conversations with the folks in your rooms. Just want to hear back from folks. Is there anyone that wants to share out, what came down to your group's 1 to 2 issue areas that are really important to the community right now? Or as a group, open it up. Go ahead, Edgar.
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, in the group, well, we introduced ourselves, but looking at what just came to mind when we're talking about issues in the community, discussing about well, let me introduce myself. I'm so sorry. My name is Edgar Hawkwinde Torres. I am the harm reduction specialist for the Pomona Pride Center, here in downtown Pomona. But I guess no, we do have a lot of issues in the community. But to narrow it down 1 to 2 is substance use disorders and mental health. So substance use disorder, we could see it as like again, the abuse of certain substances such as alcohol to tobacco, vaping, or marijuana, endless amount of substance use disorders like cocaine, methamphetamine, and all the above. However, it does affect also mental health, and correlates because these are issues that we're seeing in a diverse population, whether it's in the homeless, in our youth from age ranges from like up to 25, not just like in our youth, but overall in general. So more so being what we were talking about is the challenges and struggles that making it more aware of, in my part of harm reduction, just lessening the risky behavior at an educational point of view is just being mindful, and aware that the these things are going to happen, and breaking that stigma is just making sure that what we're doing, being more cautious, be more mindful, so that way our youth and overall in general individuals could be more safe. So that's what I could give to y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're
Substance
very
use
welcome.
and mental health are definitely big topics that really affect a lot of communities. So those are two great ones to start off with, and I think that we can help you narrow that down as we go through the training as well. And let's see, I see two. Albert, you want to go next? Share
Yeah,
out.
yeah, thank you. Our group identified homelessness and its impact on the youth population, and the other was the continuing problem with the overdose deaths, specifically among young people. But it definitely is affecting everybody. But our group really identified how homelessness is impacting the youth population and our communities as a whole. And we continue to see the rates of overdose deaths climbing. So those are two issues that our group identified.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And we'll have Marie share and then Faith. Marie, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Let's transition to regular or not my earbuds. Maybe they died. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. My name is Marie, and I'm from Urban Strategies Council. We service pretty much the Bay Area. The particular program that I work with, we service Alameda County as well as Solano County. My group was Group 5, and we talked about the main issues were substance use disorder, concentrating on like fentanyl overdose, pretty much all areas of drugs primarily, but more so fentanyl, and then also a lack of resources for students in our particular areas. Food resources, it could be just access to mental health services, just a lack of resources for students in our areas.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for sharing that. Those are going to be really important ones as well. And let's see. we'll have Faith share last, and then we'll keep going with our slides here. Go ahead, Faith.
Okay, hi, I'm Faith Galati with Breakthrough Sacramento. We're a year-round tuition-free college preparatory program working with under-resourced youth to get them to and through college and to train future diverse educators. In our group, we discussed what many of us all have discussed, and that is seeing more access to drugs, and in particular marijuana, in our younger students. The challenge with that, but also the challenge with policy and how those youth are being treated when there are problems with vaping in the schools, that the policies aren't necessarily helping the youth, but rather creating more of a militant or locked down type of situation. Regardless, what we are all reporting is that students at young ages, including vaping in elementary school, should be a profound concern for the communities.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's super important with young people, even younger people accessing drugs in different settings as well. So this work just keeps on getting more important if access to drugs is getting to young people that are younger. So with that, keep those in mind, and so glad that all of you were able to get to that point of at least identifying 1 to 2. We can get going with some of what we have. So what we have for you next is just the 3 different frameworks that we want to share with you to help think about just issues in society and the different levels and different ways that we can think about how you want to address this issue, to kind of get us primed to talk about how to narrow down what it is about homelessness in youth, what it is about lack of resources in the community, what it is lack of substance use disorder that we actually want to tackle. Okay, so the first one is really the ecological model. Is anybody familiar with the ecological model? Has used it in their work, has learned about it? Yeah, a couple of us. Awesome. So the ecological model is really a diagram that's telling us how we are connected in the community and how we are connected everywhere, right? Like our individual actions are connected to these interpersonal relationships that we have, that connects us to a community that we have, whether it's school, whether it's your neighborhood, whether it's your city, and then that connects us to society, and backwards as well. From societal issues that are happening, they trickle down to the community and show up differently. And they show up in our relationships that we have with our families, with our friends, with our classmates, and then they impact us individually and show up as different behaviors such as drug use, or other health compromising behaviors that we might have or that we're seeing in young people, right? So it's important to think about these relationships in these different levels, because they can really start to point us to the root causes of why these are happening.
Wow.
And in, for example, in society, those are the cultural norms or the access that we have, or the messages that young people are constantly hearing. And then the policies that rule, whether they're policies that are there or lack of policies that are not there to regulate some of these systems that we really are aiming to regulate. At the community level, lots of things are happening at schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, churches. And I want to say that for a lot of our work, this is where a lot of the issues that we see fall, because that's where we're at the most, at the community level. And we see how it impacts us and that particular context. And of course, the relationship in the individual level, we really see a whole lot more impact of what is it doing to families? What is it doing to young people? What is it doing to our community members when these issues go unresolved? So this is just a framework to think about, when you're thinking about a specific issue, for example, like an individual issue, think about how it's tied to the relationships that they have with their friends, with their families. How is that tied to the community, and how is it impacting at the end of the society? Just so that your brain and your way of thinking can go between these levels of influence, it can help us think about the issue differently and help us think about how to solve it differently too. And just one example of that is, for example, on the individual level, per level, there's different ways that we can solve or that we can think about solutions. For example, at the individual level, we can think of the individual doing things like recycling or doing a petition or, going to a treatment and working on themselves to be able to change some of those behaviors. At the relationship level, we can think about how can we interact with the community members that maybe have power in the community, such as decision makers or leaders, that can trickle up into different local policies that can change social norms, that can change access points in the community. And then there's bigger societal levels that because of the community action that's happening, it can blow up into different things. And you can think of big movements like Black Lives Matters or Me Too or union strikes even, that have really benefited from all of these different levels of interaction with the ecological model. So again, that's just one way of thinking about it, one way of really interacting with the different issues that are in our community, because it can be overwhelming to think of just like, we've named it of like homelessness. Like, where does this actually live? Is this a community issue that we're dealing with, or is this a societal issue that we're dealing with, that like everywhere in America, homelessness is a issue? And if it is, like, how does that translate into my community? Like, who are the most affected in my community that need the support the most? And how is that affecting relationships between folks, relationships between organizations, relationships between families? And at the individual level, like, what does the individual who's experiencing homelessness actually need? So that's the kind of thinking that we want to encourage and just kind of see throughout the training. And hopefully you take this with you so that young people can also help us think about these different levels. And any questions on the ecological model? Anything that's popping up for folks? Okay, just scan. And now I'll pass it to Wendy to talk about the social determinants of health.
Perfect. Thank you, Monse. And thank you for laying out the model and really identifying the relationship between each of these levels. I think it's really important, and we'll talk about this right throughout the training. I think the goal is to identify the root cause. So we're identifying the most appropriate solution. And so those two slides are really helpful to really think about, okay, like if we're thinking about at a community level, what are the community solutions and vice versa? So thank you for laying that out. And this next section, as Monse mentioned, we'll be talking a little bit more about the social determinants of health. Before we jump into that, we do want to share this video with you all that talks a little bit about the ways that our built environment influence our life expectancy, influence our access to healthcare, and all of the things. And so I'll let the video speak for itself, and then we'll come back together and we can hear some thoughts from folks in the room.
Or should I zoom? Could you have mobile view on?
We do something with we'll use those folks that need some muting. I learned that you can click share sound when you're clicking share screen so that you can hear the sound. If anybody didn't know that, that's a really good tip for your Zoom meetings, because I had been struggling with sound so much. Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
What determines how long we'll live? Is it what we do? Is it who we are? Actually, when it comes to predicting how long you'll live, your zip code is more important than your genetic code. Here's how this works. Meet Deb and Maria. They both have jobs, they're around the same age, they're both married, and they both have 2 kids. Deb lives in A-Town, while Maria lives in B-Ville, less than 1 mile away. They're similar in so many ways, but here's the thing. On average, residents of B-Ville will die more than 15 years sooner than the residents of A-Town. Why? Because where you live is about more than just your address. It's about your opportunities. For example, Deb and Maria's access to healthy options is really different. In A-Town, Deb's family is surrounded by healthy food options, including farmers markets, specialty shops, and grocery stores. The air in A-Town is cleaner and fresher, And there are lots of safe, clean parks where Deb can exercise and her children can play. A-Town has good public schools for Deb's kids and easy access to emergency and preventive health care. On the other hand, Beeville has broken, badly lit sidewalks, and the parks are unsafe. The air is filled with truck exhausts from the nearby highway. And for food options, Maria's only choices are Beeville's many liquor stores, fast food places, or convenience stores. The schools in Beeville are overcrowded and undersupported. And even if Maria can get her kids into better schools far away, she needs to figure out how to get them there without access to a car. So for Maria, having to juggle so much to find healthy options can be an overwhelming source of chronic stress, which is a serious health risk factor. In fact, for all the residents of Beeville, chronic stress drives health problems like obesity, diabetes, asthma, and heart disease. How did A-Town and Beeville get so different? Well, in many cases in cities and towns across California, the root cause was racial and economic discrimination. Over the generations, poor white people and people of color were pushed to less desirable parts of town. Where banks refused to lend money, businesses left, jobs too, schools declined, and the neighborhood crumbled. Everyone who could move away did. And what's more, when communities like A-Town and Beeville are so unequal, Beeville isn't the only one that suffers. Because it turns out that not only is your zip code a predictor of how long you'll live, so is what country you live in. Countries with the greatest income inequality have the lowest life expectancy. So even Americans like Deb, who are white, insured, college-educated, and upper income, die younger than their peers in other countries. In fact, our life expectancy is 43rd in the world, and that number is slipping. In the end, our biggest health risk may actually be inequality, and extreme inequality hurts us all. So what do we do? Well, if we're all going to be healthier, we don't just need to help the folks in Beeville beat the odds. We need to change the odds for everyone. And that's what we're doing. There's a movement happening. We're Californians. We don't follow. We lead. We are building the power to make health happen in communities across the state. We are coming together to build one California, a smarter, more inclusive and equitable state that creates health and opportunity for all of us. Join us. To learn more, visit buildinghealthycommunities.org.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to ask
Yeah.
folks, if you are not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. But I would love to hear some reflections, reactions from a couple people. What are some general thoughts that are coming up after watching this video? Kiadrian, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Please correct me if I didn't.
It's okay, Wendy. It's Keydrian.
Kiadrian.
And yes, I mean, at the beginning, I was just like feeling very frustrated because for so many of us, this is our reality, not just for us, but like our ancestors. So it's difficult because it's like, wow, this is like really what's happening. But then towards the end, you know, being in California, I know that we do have more initiatives and opportunities. We're not where we probably want to be, but it gave some insight to hope in having this meeting. I wasn't expecting that. I thought I was going to start crying for a minute because it was like, wow, this is deep. But I was very impressed with that. It hit home. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Keydrian, because I share in the frustration. I felt it in my body. I felt my body tense up. I had to roll my shoulders a little bit, especially when I'm hearing that as a country, we're like, what, 43rd in our life expectancy. And to your point, this is our real life, right? We watch this video, we come to these trainings, we work in nonprofits, there's deliverables and contracts and all those things. And it is our real life that how long we are on this earth is impacted by our built environment that is controlled by other human beings. Right. And so to your point, I love it at the very end. And I love that the video at the very end ends off on a hopeful note about the state that we live in, but also the fact that we're here on a Thursday at 11 o'clock in the morning. There's 170 people in this room who work with young people, right? Who have like an understanding of the way that our built environment impacts the work that we're doing, the way that our communities are able to live on this earth. And so, one, appreciation for you all being here, and two, actually, before we move on, Gabby, I see you. I just want to offer. I'll just give you the space to share. Go for it, and then I see you, Yonsei. Go for it, Gabby.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I watched a very similar type of video in my undergrad, and it's actually what inspired me to get my degree in public health and my master's in public health. And I remember it brought back an article I had to read for school, which is like, do poor people deserve trees? And it's true, you know, and especially here in the Bay Area, it's a constant fight to even try to get more open land and access to that. Additionally, even having a bunch of small businesses, and you know what's gentrification, and one of the groups that I work with the youth, it's called Restrictive Covenant, and it's about redlining and discovering the deep-rooted history, specifically in the county I work in, Marin County, which is a very wealthy county, predominantly white county. Everyone out there makes, you know, triple figures. But what we're working with is that there's still a huge disparity, you know, where you have a multi-million-dollar neighborhood right next to a low-income neighborhood. And going there, even as a college student, was a struggle, and just trying to find resources. And I think that this video is an important take on the reality of it. And yes, while being in California, we're very lucky that we're having conversations about equity, but I think this emphasizes that there's a lot more work that needs to be done and a lot more voices that need to be shared and heard.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Gabby. I used to work in Marin County too, and so Marin City was really excited when they got a Target, because the Target was going to offer groceries, right? And so like that's the mentality that folks in 2023 are dealing with, of like, I'm shopping at Target and I'm happy to bring it in because that's where I get my groceries. Whereas like a couple blocks down, right across the highway, folks have access to Sprouts and Whole Foods and all the things. So I appreciate you for sharing your experience. Yonsei, you go for it.
I don't want to take up too much space because many of y'all are echoing this in the chat, as well as taking yourselves off mute. But this also reminds me, is like we have a lot of like, it change is really slow, and often y'all, we're not asking folks to actually save anybody's world or to save the world, but in actuality to meet people's access needs, right? To meet people's basic human needs is what folks are needing, is what folks are asking for. And to watch this and hear them name that your zip code determines your life expectancy more than your DNA isn't something that it always takes me aback. But I'm like, yes, I can understand this, because we've been fighting for this in our own communities and in our own neighborhoods and in our hoods since the beginning of hood, right? So like the idea that so much of that impacts our actual bodies, and not only our bodies, but our babies' bodies, our children's bodies, our kids, is a lot to hold. And so I'm grateful that we're in space together.
Thank you, Yonsei. Appreciate you. Salma, I see you. Go for it.
Similarly, I don't want to take up too much time, but also just wanted to bring up the idea that, you know, all of us assumably are from California, but even outside of California, there's this idea that like California is this like huge blue, like equitable area. But what we see is a lot of these initiatives are being propagated in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles, and that's great. But you know, as someone who was born, raised, and loves LA, and then moved out to the Central Valley, places like Stanislaus, Merced, and Tuolumne counties, I can't help but think, you know, what are we doing? Because those places are so much further behind in terms of resources than a lot of the more urban populated areas. And what would equity look like when we're trying to even catch up places that don't want to have these types of resources, right? We up here in the Central Valley, in Tuolumne specifically, that's in the foothills of the Sierra, we have schools who are saying they do not need mental health resources and actively take off mental health resources from their websites because they're saying, we don't need that, we don't need that. So just what this makes me think of is I love this so much, but for the specific community that I'm serving, you know, we can pass as many policies as we want, but some of these schools are just going to take the fine. So what can we then do? I guess is my kind of rhetorical question, to make sure that all of these policies are being, people are being held accountable to make sure that these policies are being carried out.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Simon. I appreciate that you named it a rhetorical question, because I do not have an answer for you. and part of it, and I offer that as like a lightening up the mood, in the sense that I hear you. It's tough because it's not just about changing like a structure or a system. It's about the ways that the structure and the system have colonized the ways that we think about things. And that adults are saying, young people don't need this. We good, right? When we know like actually more than ever, we are in dire need of support of our young people, because we've got middle school and elementary school students vaping, right? And we know that the root cause of substance abuse is a lot deeper than that. And so I appreciate you for sharing your perspective. Because of time, I'm going to move us on just a little. I'm going to move us forward, but I ask that you keep sharing your thoughts in the chat. I see the chat. I hope that folks are reacting and engaging with the chat. I saw a beautiful quote dropped in there by Albert that kind of makes us think a little bit further beyond our role in our organization and just as a person in society. And so I appreciate that. But I'm gonna go ahead and move us to the next slide. So let's go ahead and move on to the social determinants of health, and we'll move through this rather quickly, because it sounds like folks have a really strong understanding of the ways that our built environment are kind of impacting the choices that we have as human beings on this earth in our communities. And so the social determinants of health is another public health framework or theory that we can use to think about and identify what are some of the most pressing issues in our community right now. And it's a lot of things, right? But this can help us narrow it down. And so the first aspect of the social determinants of health that we can think about is economic stability. So in your community, is there access to employment? Is there access to employment that's offering livable wages? Is there access to internship programs that are paid for young people? What does debt look like in a community? Inflation is at an all-time high right now. So folks are using credit cards at an all-time high to survive. And so what does that look like when we're putting ourselves in more debt out of survival? That has a significant impact on our communities. When we think about the neighborhood and the physical environment, what does housing look like in a community? Is there high levels of homelessness? And we're hearing that, yes, across all cities, across all larger urban cities, and even across rural communities, we're seeing a spike in homelessness. What about the parks and the walkability? I grew up walking to the grocery store with my grandma, and this was during the time when you can like actually take the carts from the grocery store back to your house. And this was back in the time when we had food stamps that were actually like in a little paper book, and you go up to the grocery person and you like rip off your food stamps or whatever. And it was really important that as me and my grandma were walking home, that our sidewalks didn't have too many bumps, and that there were trees along the way, because my grandma can't walk that far, right? And so she needed to stop under every tree to get some shade and catch her breath. And so those are memories that I have growing up that I would have never considered as something that is contributing to the stresses in our lives, that's contributing to whether or not I'm going to have an extra 20 years on this earth compared to somebody else who can get groceries delivered, or who can drive to the grocery store because it's down, or, can access a grocery store that's down the street. And so those kinds of things are important to think about. What about education? What is the literacy levels in our community? What are the languages spoken and our services offered in the languages that are predominantly spoken in our communities? Is there vocational training for young people that are graduating high school and don't want to go to a four-year university? What are the opportunities that we have that are actually creating educational opportunities for our young people in our communities? Because we know skills pay the bills. We live under capitalism, right? And so that means that we need to make sure that young people are able to survive, that our communities are able to have a livable wage, right? And survive in that way. And then when we can think about food, what does food look like in our communities? A lot of us might be living in food deserts where you have to drive out 20 miles to get fresh produce. That's a problem. And so how can we think about what the access to healthy options looks like and think about what the appropriate solutions are, right? I heard folks say like we could pass all the policies, and maybe policies might not be the appropriate solution for this particular issue, right? Maybe we're thinking about local food banks. Maybe we're talking about cooperatives. So what are the other solutions that we could really think about? Then we move on to community safety and social context. So what are the support systems that are available in a particular community? Are there opportunities for community engagement so that folks that are in a community feel like they have a stake and that they have agency over what their community looks like and what happens in their community? What's the stress levels in a community? What's the exposure to violence and trauma? Crime is spiking up across the country, right? We've got folks that are doing whatever they got to do to survive. And so there's an increase in the exposure to violence and trauma. And then lastly, we can think about the healthcare system. Do our people got healthcare coverage? What are the providers and pharmacy availability in our particular communities? Do they have culturally competent, culturally linguistic appropriate materials for the folks in our communities? And what's the actual quality of care? I grew up going to a little clinic behind a high school in LA, and that was the best that we could do, right? I wasn't going to go to no doctor's office, but I was going to a community clinic that was behind a high school. And that kind of solution was critical. So whoever decided at the high school that this was going to be like a center for more than just education was really on point with that because our community really needed that, right? And so this is a way, again, to think about what are the issues that are impacting our community and what are the most appropriate solutions that are going to make sense for this particular issue that we've identified. So hopefully the social determinants of health is a useful framework for you all to think about, and coupled along with that video that we just watched, it can really get deep into what some of the root causes are of what we're actually experiencing. Really quickly, are there any questions about the social determinants of health? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my co-facilitator, Yante, to round us out.
Hey, folks, thank you so much, Wendy. So I would like to take us through another tool that we... Hi, folks. If you are not talking, could you please put yourself on mute? Thank you so much. All right. We're going to move through another tool that we use to identify some root causes of some of these problems or issues that we see in our communities. And so sometimes we see issues in our communities, and those are actually symptoms of a bigger problem. And those symptoms are rooted in various root causes. So root causes can look like what we must address for symptoms to disappear. So, and instead of just treating the symptoms, so these are the things that are obvious to our eyes. So yes, we have folks using substances. Yes, we see homeless people, but what is fundamentally happening to those people or those people in those communities to cause homelessness, to cause someone to move to substances as a coping mechanism or whatever reason that they're using substances? These are our root causes. And in order to make root causes go away, we have to cure them, not treat the symptoms. So we have to dig deeper than just the things that are visual or to our eyes or at the forefront or what we see as an issue, and move to what is actually happening and why is it happening. It often makes us answer the question, who is being affected, what and how are they being affected, and when did this happen? How did it happen? Where did it happen? Who is it happening to? So like if we go back to our ecological maps and the other tool that we identified in the first couple of minutes of our training, how is this happening on an individual level? How is this happening interpersonally in our relationships with each other? How is it happening in our community? And then how is it happening to our society? What is causing all of those things to happen? And then moves us to understand or ask the question, how do we know when a symptom is either a symptom or a root cause? A symptom will also often put the responsibility on an individual to change, either that be in a behavior, an attitude, versus the root cause will put the blame, or it will ask the system to instead change. The system could be a school, a government, a policy. It requires a communal effort. So everybody, right? It's not an individual level. It's not just you and your friend going through a problem, but it's an act to the whole community to identify what the root cause is and fix it on a collective level. Because of this, root causes may not only cause an issue, but they can also worsen it, right? So if we're talking about substance use, whatever led that person to use substances often is the root cause, right? Young people aren't acting up at school if they have the things that they need at home, right? If they have pencils, if they have paper, if they're getting breakfast, it's hard to tell young people to come to a classroom if they haven't had food, if they haven't had the clothes that they need, if they haven't taken the showers or talked to the right people or gotten the right therapy or resources. So there are underlying factors. So we can go to our root cause tree on the left side of our screen. The symptoms are at the top. So these are the things that are obvious to our eyes, that are obvious to our communities and society. The bigger issue is the trunk, and our root causes are underneath, at the ground. It's at the root. And so, but we're going to shift you all into a break before you get to take your own time to identify and fill out this root cause tree. And we can move to our next page. Break. Okay. All right. So you all can have a 5-minute break, and we will see you back at 11, right? Can I get a time check? I
11:15.
forgot time. Thank you. 11:15. So we'll see you back at 11:15.
Very strict. Go to the restroom. Do what we can with the 5 minutes that we have. But okay, for our next session, we're really gonna dive into the roots and causes. The roots and branches that Yante went over to really try to identify what's a symptom and what's an actual root. And this is just gonna be a conversation between you and your group. We're gonna have you all go back into your groups that you were originally. You may have one or two less folks from your original groups because folks have been coming in and out, but that's okay. The groups have at least a pair so that you can continue these conversations with the original issues that you all identified in the beginning. So in the chat, Jen is going to share a link that's going to take you to your very own copy of the roots and branches activity that we have. It's going to look a little bit something like this. It's going to take you to make your own copy. So you're going to go ahead and make your own copy there. And this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have a couple of examples already set up for you. One, for example, like a head cold, so that you can kind of see the analogy of what it looks like to put up the branches and the roots. For example, the head cold, right? Like some of the symptoms that you get there literally are headaches or nausea or runny nose or whatever it is that you're feeling on the outside and that you can see. But the roots are definitely like maybe the germs, right? Like someone gave it, was contagious and gave that to you, or you didn't wear a sweater at nighttime, whatever it is. That's the root cause of getting a head cold. We also have another example for you all that you can keep referencing. One, for example, is alcoholism, right? Like some of the symptoms that you might see someone that's experiencing this is like they may be isolated, they may be losing money, they maybe lost their job, they maybe have a liver disease, or all these different symptoms that I think can go on and on. But the root cause of that might be like they're actually experiencing a really tough like mental health issue in their families, or they just suffered a big loss, or actually it was a lot of the access that was happening in their community and they live right next to 3 liquor stores that makes it really easy for them to, you know, access these drugs. And then we have blank ones for you all where you can insert your topic. So if your topic was homelessness with youth or substance use disorders, this is where it's gonna go, and this is where you and your team can think about symptoms and think about things that are popping up that you're seeing that are because of this issue here, and then think of the roots, what's actually beneath it, and what can we actually extract from these symptoms that can be the roots, and just try it out. There's 2 here, I mean, there's 4 that are blank, so if you have more time and want to try out a different topic, or just want to focus on one, you have the flexibility to do that within your group. But we just want you to, you know, talk to each other again, start thinking about it. There may be more than 2 causes, so you feel free to, you know, write up any other causes that you think are there. But this is just an opportunity for you to both work as a team and also have your own instrument in front of you to work through this. And you can continue to use this with your young people or with a different group that you have. You'll have access to this copy. And so I just want to invite everyone to click on that link right now, because once we go into the breakout rooms, it will not show up in your chat box anymore. So give you a minute to do that. And everyone's going to be able to take their own notes. So you can take as many notes as you want, or you can take as many or not take as many notes as you want and just contribute. But I am going to ask when we come back if there's like 1 or 2 folks that want to share their screens and share with us their trees. Okay, so to us. And yes, the recording will be shared with everyone. And thank you for those that just joined us. And okay, Jen, we're ready to open up the breakout rooms again. And hopefully you have the same folks that you were with.
Opening the rooms now.
Thank you. And you have about 10 minutes with your groups as well. All right, it looks like we have almost everyone back. I would just like to invite anyone from any group to share one of your trees with us. You can share your screen and just walk us through what that looked like for your group.
We'll go team 3. Edwin, could you share your screen, please?
Sure.
Then we'll go to you, Gabby, okay? Okay.
Awesome, thank you, Edwin. So our topic, our problem issue is substance abuse. The symptoms we put for our youth is skipping, missing school, domestic violence, activity of loss. Oh, sorry.
Unlawful activity, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Unlawful activity, loss of family, friends, unhealthy relationships. So that's the symptoms. The roots are peer pressure, mental health, which leads to anxiety, depression, also trauma, such as sexual abuse, domestic violence, also community environment access, and then misuse, such as like using recreational and then goes to dependency. But this is our, root and branches for substance abuse.
Hey, round of applause for this group. That looks really awesome. Hope you're getting lots of emojis of appreciation. Anything that was surprising from this or anything that came up for your group that was like an aha moment or anything that you would like to share?
Just the literal exercise of seeing the branches come together, right? Because everybody's sort of trying to put everything in on the branches, and then you start seeing that, hey, these branches do sort of branch off from one another. There's areas that can develop other branches on top of, so it's just, it gives you unlimited potential to really break down and get that granular strategy and aspect to whatever the problem and issue that you're trying to tackle.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your example and modeling for us and having faith in the process here. So appreciate your group. And I think we had another person that wanted to share.
Yeah, I'll go next. Thank you. I will share my screen. So for my group and I, we found a common problem of poor mental health within our own work experience with youth. And we found that for the roots, it was the pandemic. I think the there's new statistics that are, continuing to come out about how the pandemic has affected youth's mental health, and how the symptoms of that is lack of social skills, not seeking help, and that goes along with the roots of stigma, and how that connects to societal norm and cultural expectations, and how in combination of those things, it can turn into isolation, having imposter syndrome, depression and anxiety, and participating within self-harm. And we had discussions about how self-harm can come up in many different ways, and that it doesn't necessarily mean, cutting yourself. It can mean not even having any attention to your basic hygiene, not eating, not sleeping. And so and those things of self-harm can go unnoticed, right? And that's a really another big issue to talk about. But overall, it was a really great exercise. And if any of my group members would like to share more, please feel welcome to.
Great job, Gabby and team. And yeah, thank you for pointing out that those social norms, right? Like as root causes, that's something that you can work with and like really do something about and actually see a change when it comes to like those root causes. And for purposes of time, because we're getting closer and we still want you all to get to one more activity here, we're gonna transition into the next one. So keep your thoughts and thank you for being so willing to share as well. These have been great to see what happened in your groups. And I'm gonna pass it to Wendy to walk us through our last activity to kind of wrap us up with your root causes.
Let me just get set up here on my little share screen. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Y'all did a great job in working through that activity, and I hope that you all take this back with your young people too, and the young folks that you work with, because it's, to your point, Edwin, a really helpful visual. I'm a visual learner, so I like to see all the things too. Before we jump into this next breakout group, we want to just offer a few potential strategies. We've already talked a little bit about this, so I'm just going to run through it really quickly. If you've got questions, please drop them in the chat. Some folks in this room might have heard of environmental prevention. Other folks may have not. This is a strategy that folks in the public health field use to identify strategies to address substance prevention, in particular, access to substance use or access to substances for young people, particularly focusing on the environment, right? So this is different than individual prevention, which is telling a young person, don't do drugs. It's like a focus on the idea that it's your moral choice of doing it or not doing it. Whereas opposed to environmental prevention is really focusing on what's happening in a young person's environment that's influencing the kind of choices that they're making. And so we can really break this down into 4 different things, right? We can break it down into media. So what are the media messages that they're receiving? On any given day, we're receiving about 60,000 messages from radio, phone, all the things. And so how can we use that as an opportunity to look at what media messages they're looking at and consuming on a daily basis? The second is access. And so how easy is it to access alcohol or drugs in a local community? Are there liquor stores on every corner? Are they getting it from friends and family? Is it something that's available at school? What does access look like? The next thing is really looking at policies and laws. Some folks mentioned earlier that policy change isn't always the most appropriate solution or isn't getting us to see the solutions that we want to see. And for other folks, you might have a policy angle in your project or in your deliverables. And so it's important to think about what are the current policies and laws that are in place or not in place, lack thereof of policies and laws that are either making it so that alcohol is easily accessible or any kind of drug really is easily accessible or not, right? What does that look like? And then lastly, it's the social and community norms around substances. And so what are the things that we consider normal? Culturally, we drink around celebrations. And so there's this like link between being happy and drinking, consuming alcohol, right? Sports events, quinceañeras, right? There's all of these ways that we kind of look at alcohol and tobacco and other drugs in our community that contribute to the way young people are also seeing of any particular substance or a particular issue, if you will, because I think this can also be brought in as a strategy to use in addressing other issues outside of substance prevention. A few other things are like photo voice projects. A photo voice project is an opportunity for young people to use photos and taking pictures of their community and then identifying what they're seeing through these photos and then using that as a way to express their concerns to decision makers. And then lastly, you can use this as an opportunity to think about what kind of community forum or town hall can we host and who can we bring to that can really influence either the kind of issue area that we're choosing or the way that we're going to address any particular issue. And so really quick synopsis of like what environmental prevention is, what potential strategies you can use. For the next 10 minutes or so, you'll be put back into your groups, and we're going to take it a step further. So you've been able to now identify what are the roots and what are the branches. And now as a team, you'll brainstorm to think about what's a potential strategy that we can implement to address this particular issue or cause. And so the hope is that this can be a helpful workshop so that when you leave this space, you've already done some practice on identifying what an issue is and like what are some of the potential solutions. Okay, is that clear to folks? Can I get a thumbs up just to make sure that folks are following my little fast talking here? Awesome, thank you, thank you. Okay, so in your groups, you will have access to a Jamboard. Jen, if you could be so lovely as to drop that link in the chat, that would be fantastic. And on this Jamboard, it's gonna be a blank Jamboard. You'll have an example on there that'll show you kind of what the instructions are. On the Jamboard, on the left-hand side, you'll have a little toolbar and it'll give you an opportunity to like jazz it up. So you can use a Post-it to add text to your Jamboard. You can use Google Images to add some GIFs or images if that's something that's useful for you. And then lastly, you can also use the text box to type in anything that you'd like. The Post-it notes are limited on characters, and so if you want to type a little bit more, you can use the text box. Okay, and so went a little bit too far. So with that said, if folks are ready, I think we can go ahead and break back out into our groups, and we'll call you back in about 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I know that's not enough time, not nearly enough time. Welcome back. No worries. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Welcome back, folks. Okay, there we go. There we go. Looks like we've got most folks back. I know that was not nearly enough time to ask you to create some kind of campaign or project. Like what? The hope is though that you're able to touch on the process and get a better understanding of like what does it look like to identify an issue, and then what are some of the steps that it takes? What are some of the conversations that it takes? And so, with that said, I would love to offer the floor to folks who wanted to share last time. So I know Jean, you had your hand up, and there was somebody else who had their hand up that I cannot remember, but I wanted you all to offer you all the opportunity to share first, if you're open, interested. And I see you in the chat. Naeem, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I see you want to share also. Got you in the queue.
Okay. We definitely, like you said, didn't have a ton of time to wrap up what we were talking about, but we kind of focused on just access and availability to drugs and alcohol, and especially like we were noted that at such a younger and younger age we're seeing. And so one strategy we thought of was working with local liquor stores, smoke shops, dispensaries. Someone pointed out, that the smoke shops, if you drop by, I know me with the youth I speak to locally, they know exactly which smoke shops carry products that they shouldn't carry, sell to underage youth, stuff like that. And whether, the strategy would be to report that to law enforcement or to explain what we do and want to speak to the people running the shop, like that's one strategy we came up with. I mentioned that our organization, we actually were asked by the school district to offer parental education classes specifically about substance abuse and all the various, parents don't even know what they're seeing when they see kids with all these different vape products and the mushroom chocolate bars and just all kinds of stuff, and like I said, at a younger and younger age. So yeah, I think that sums up most of what we covered.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jean. Appreciate you for offering the alternative solutions, especially when we're thinking about the fact that shops are selling illegally and young folks know those spots, right? So I appreciate you. Thank you for lifting that. And then I see Naeem in the chat. So I want to invite you also to share before we move into our closing.
Yeah, you said me, right?
Yes, and feel free to correct me if I pronounce your name incorrectly.
How'd you say it?
Naeem?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We spoke about seeing a lot of drug use, root cause. If you guys hear a squeak, excuse me, it's my dog. Um, we spoke root cause being lack of relationship with God, and also lack of stability in the household, specifically around fathers not being present. And one thing that we talked about in this last session was the importance of embodiment. So I can't tell you about peace if I embody anxiety as a leader, if I'm trying to help you. I can't tell you about joy if I embody sadness. And just how we need to make accountability, and I'm speaking from a man's perspective because I'm a man, is accountability as men cool again, being present cool again, make working hard and being a person of your word cool again, because the media has done a great job of making promiscuity, and also like lack of accountability, drug abuse, and violence within our community lucrative, but it's not. And so if I'm dealing with youth and I'm accountable and I'm about my word and I'm about my family and I show up with joy and love, and I'm working with a youth who's depressed and is on drugs or alcohol every day, and I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to convert you to anything, but this is what's worked for me. You've tried this for X amount of years or X amount of months and it hasn't worked for you. How about try this transition, see how it goes? Then I think that would be powerful, because, most of the youth that I deal with, they know it's not working, but it's the only thing that's helping them numb the pain. And we talked about what it means to be in a father role position, and that's accountability and that's commitment. And most people won't see it through if they don't think it's worth it, but it's absolutely worth it. It makes our neighborhood safer. It makes our houses and our families more strong and stable, and it makes everybody's living situation better. So just being able to walk in that, we discussed, and that's extremely important for our next generation.
Oh, that's a word. Naeem, thank you for taking the floor and offering that to this group. You are receiving a lot of love in the chat, and I saw a lot of reactions. And I think it's an important reminder as we, being adults in this work, to remember that we're practitioners in our own healing too, and that our own healing is interconnected to the healing of our young people. That's also interconnected to the healing of our elders. And so I appreciate you for bringing it back to the fact that we need to practice what we preach out here, right? And that young people do what they see, not what they hear. They're not do what we tell them. They're gonna do what we show them. And so, thank you so much for bringing that up and uplifting that in this space.
You're welcome.
With that said, I'm gonna go ahead and transition and hand it off to Yante. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen for you, Yante, and we'll close out.
Congressman, thank you for everyone who shared. Really, really deeply appreciate it. So I want to take us through about what we talked about today, just to recap our training before we close out and do our evaluation. So today, y'all, we explored issues that were important to our communities that existed in this room and beyond. We learned about tools to help understand those.
This is getting ridiculous.
Thank you. We learned about the tools to help understand the levels of issue areas in our communities, outside of our communities, on the interpersonal level, on a systematic level. We identified the root causes of issue areas. We brainstormed policy and campaign ideas to address root causes of issues. We made our rounds around change. We talked about what it meant to engage and do this work when the work is us, right? When it is our communities that we're talking about. And I'm super, super thankful. We can now move to our last slide. We want to thank you all for coming into this training. And we also have a reminder before we offer that we do our training evaluations, that we also have office hours September 5th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if you have not signed up for office hours, please do so. We still have some time flat. And our last thing that we're going to do today is our training evaluation. You can use this QR code and use your phone to snap the QR code or use the link in the chat. Thank you, Jen. The Survey Monkey link will take you to the survey. Please take your time to do it, and it is like your exit slip. So once you are done, you may leave the training. Do what you need. Yes, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for being in this facilitation. Sorry, I was reading the chat, and
Thank you.
yes, thank you, Jessica. Okay. You folks, please take your time to do that evaluation as well before you all leave, please. We love the feedback.
Appreciate the in real time feedback in the chat too, folks. Thank you. Be well, Isabel. Thank you. Appreciate you, Pedrin. Have a blessed day, folks.